thought. Perfect. So people that missed the start, we can hop back into this. I'm excited to talk about this today. I'll give some history on what we're talking about and why in a moment. But I figured I'd introduce myself and Nik Lowry. Nik, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first and maybe give them a little background on how you and Tim came together, your history, and then how M3 came together and what's going on there?
Absolutely. Thanks for joining, everyone. So Metro Mountain Mortgage, otherwise affectionately referred to as M3, because the former is a mouthful, was really born out of the need for, or the desire for, so many home buyers to have a one-stop shop option. And so we are essentially the in-house lender for Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Utah properties. And when I say we, Tim Peterson and I, Tim Peterson is not here, he's traveling for work today, essentially manage the mortgage company that supports each of you. And we each have more than 20 years of mortgage lending experience, all the way up to a senior management level, both in sales and in operations. And he and I met at a previous company a little bit over 10 years ago, and quickly hit it off with just having a similar vision on how to support business partners and clients alike, and both having and what we refer to in the mortgage business and operations background, which is more guideline related and underwriting and things like that, and both of us having a sales background. We were both very like-minded and decided to come together to essentially lead Metro Mountain Mortgage in support of all of you. So that's sort of high level, really how the company got started. And through all this, Jake has been an integral part of the creation of the company and been incredibly supportive of us, and has served as this is kind of an understatement, but as a consultant and a key driver in the stand-up of the organization. So I really appreciate all of Jake's efforts, standing up the company and then going forward even today with helping us with this presentation. Jake, is there anything that you would add to that based on what you know about Tim and I and the creation of Metro Mountain Mortgage?
No, that's great. I'll maybe add some color. I think most of you logging on know me, but for those that don't, Jake Breen, been a licensed broker, realtor for 20 years. So do the same job as most of you. I'm still actively in the trenches with my team, Utah Cribs. My business partner, Spencer Janke, and I started at a no-name discount brokerage 19 years ago. And well, the rest is history. So I like to tell people we have a pretty experienced and eclectic background because we've done a decent amount of selling, but we've also dabbled in all facets of real estate because, as you know, I think this is the best industry. I've taught on and off as an adjunct professor at Westminster College, which I attended, 17 years ago. And when I'm teaching MBA students, sometimes I'm a little jaded because they'll ask what's kind of the best launching pad for a career. And I say, well, it's great you're getting an MBA, but I also think a real estate license is easy. We tend to think a license just allows us to sell, but allows us to do many other things. Under that umbrella of unique things, just so you kind of know my background, and it's going to lead into what we discussed today. That's how I met Tim Peterson, Nik's partner in M3 and president. Him and I, 16 years ago, bought a cabin up in Eden, Utah, in Huntsville, which now y'all know the area, but a lot of people didn't quite know it. And at the time, a lot of movie stars were leaving the Park City area because they were kind of sick of Sundance and paparazzi and all these things that came with Park City getting extremely popular. Not to knock on that market, it's a great market, but we were getting movie stars coming over to rent our cabin, but that area was not established on Airbnb and VRBO yet. So I got to deal with those companies in the early days and establish zip code 84310, which is Eden. Gosh, ran the gamut of doing referrals. I've run relocation for 2 different luxury brands. I started my own referral software called Digit, where we refer doctors around the country. And then everything under the umbrella of residential and some other asset classes in real estate, we've done at Team Utah Cribs. Not only sold them, but we've owned them, developed them, made some blunders, been through markets ups and downs. And throughout all of that, Nick, if you want to just open slide 1, I have often wondered this, and I think many of you on this call, especially those that have been at it a long time, have had similar thoughts. I'm looking at Steve Chin as he logged on because he's been around a long time. And Steve, I bet you've had these thoughts. I've often wondered when I can't sleep at night, if the timeline, the timeline in which consumers buy residential real estate is the best way to go about buying residential real estate. Now, here's what I mean by this. We all know, and I'm going to be a little facetious here, but we all know nowadays with the technology at our fingertips, most consumers transact like this. They avoid us as realtors and they say, well, maybe my wife's just looking, or I'm just looking. And they surf around websites. You know which ones are most popular, okay? And once they finally fall in love with that first property, they're usually falling in love digitally. And at that point, that consumer has usually given their information. They try not to, but they've usually given their information online to somebody a decent amount of times. Why? Because they maybe have to register on a website to get more photos or to download a flyer. Every site has just different ways to hook the consumer. And then we all know as agents what starts happening, that consumer gets solicited a bunch. At this point in the process, we as realtors are usually saying, hey, use me. I can search. I have better search capabilities for you. We're also sending messages like, hey, you should get pre-qualified by a lender so you know what you can purchase. We're also saying, oh, hey, you should let me value your property so that you know how much equity you have so that you can make an educated purchase when you go to buy. My experience is, even as recent as the past week, despite my best efforts, no matter how good I can sell that message, my consumers, and I call it burning one, my consumers have to fall in love with something online, find out in the next 7 to 10 days that they can't buy it, that they don't know the current value of their current property, they're not pre-qualified, and over the past few years, we all know what happens. There's 50 other buyers that are making stronger termed offers, and our client that's just a looky-loo that's now getting serious has not gotten serious enough to what I call separate the cattle from the trough. In other words, they haven't taken actual physical steps to qualify and to buy. Well, let me go back to this timeline. Therein lies the problem, guys, with the way we've consumed real estate for centuries. We get to a point in the transaction where the buyer has to lose one, burn one, as I call it, to get serious. And then they're kind of stuck. Have you ever noticed this? We as realtors sell this type of idea, but think about the last time you personally had your own residential real estate transaction. And unless you had cash to go buy your new home first, or you have possibly a family member helping you out in that scenario, we also get a little bit stuck. By stuck, I mean this. We get to the point of excited on maybe what we can buy, and we know the value of our house, but we go, gosh, how do we align the timing stars? How do we go from looking to buying the new one to then hopefully selling our other one. And then we have to realign dates, so we only have to move once, right? You're following my logic. All these things start to happen, and it's still, as expert as we are, y'all know how difficult it is to perfectly align the timeline of a transaction if somebody has a property to sell and they want to upgrade and they have kids in school and all the other things that come along with what we do. I didn't just have this idea, which I've had many times and thought if there's a better timeline, but 8 years ago, I started seeing disruption in the business world. And I started paying more attention to this as I was teaching in the MBA departments at Westminster. That gave me a unique opportunity to see other industries. And I saw photographers get disrupted with technology. I saw travel agents get disrupted with Travelocity. I heard all the talk at the time that realtors were going to get disrupted. We saw taxi drivers get disrupted by Uber. And at the core of all this disruption was, yes, technology, but two, it was a better way or a better timeline for the consumer to transact on. I'll use Uber. I had 3 or 4 friends using Uber religiously, and I was still hailing taxis at airports and things like that. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And finally, I just bit the bullet, download the app, and I went, wow, this is just easier, and the car is cleaner, and competition creates a nicer environment for the consumer. And at the time, it was cheaper, and now it's the same or more expensive than a taxi, and we still all use it. That's the way disruption happens, right? So the question is, why has real estate not really been disrupted in a big way, or at least the way we consume residential real estate, number one. And number two, why are we still following this timeline I just laid out over the last 10 minutes? Why are we not buying a different way? All right, here's the end of my story if you're getting a little bored with my painting the picture as to why we need this technology. So after it was bothering me enough, Spence and I and a few people on our team at Utah Cribs spent a Saturday morning, and we were up on the 6th floor in the same building we're in now, and we wrote out a better, what we thought, perfect process by which consumers should consume real estate. And we went, what if cost was of no concern? What if we just had unlimited money to do whatever we wanted? What would be a better way for the consumer to transact? And we came at it with a consumer mindset. We came at it going, forget realtors, forget brokers, forget lenders, forget everybody. If we could make it smoother for the consumer, how would this work? And it took up 3 glass panels on my wall in my office upstairs, my old office. And we took pictures of it, and I talked about it a lot that year. And then we got too busy with selling and we never did anything. Fast forward to 2018, I saw that Trulia.com sold to Zillow.com for $383 million. And the founder of Trulia is a guy named Sean Black. And he had a 2-year non-compete, because that transaction was in 2016. He made a couple $100 million bucks. And in 2018, he opened knock.com. That's knock.com. Last time I checked, they're in 12 states, and they literally verbatim were selling what we had wrote out on our glass window many years prior, 3 or 4 years prior to this. So I couldn't take it. I was excited, but also frustrated with myself that I thought I had a good idea and then never did anything with it. And so I solicited Sean Black. This is usually not my nature, but I kept reaching out to him, and he would never reply. It took about 6 months, and I finally got him to reply because I noticed that he had done a similar race with the same company that I had done a race with in Arizona. And so I sent him a picture of me standing on the podium at this race. And I said, hey, I wish I could have met you, but here's me and my family, and I've been trying to get a hold of you for a while. oh, and by the way, here are some pictures of my office window 3 years ago. And he replied within like an hour. And he's like, you literally wrote out our business plan with the same revenue model we've designed and the ways to make money and all that years before we opened. Like, why didn't you do it? Him and I are still in touch, and he's been attempting to bring his program to Utah. And he's run into a lot of legal issues here. And so he is not in our state yet. But what we are talking about essentially is just a cash buy program. Okay. Now, when I say that, I think it kind of loses its luster from the eloquent story I just told for the last 15 minutes, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of you were engaged in my story. And then when I said cash program, you're like, one, what the heck does that mean? And two, oh, there's tons of those. Okay. I'm not watching the chat, but maybe by the way of just raising your hands in your video, who has heard of a cash buy program that's popped up during COVID? Just raise your hands if you've heard of one, right? So many of you are. Yes, cat's out of the bag. They've gotten popular. There's a million of them. And if you don't know this yet, you're about to learn how well funded they are. What I mean by that is, if you're wondering what might be the billion-dollar funded disruption idea that really makes a dent in the way we've continued to consume real estate for centuries, I believe it is cash buy programs. Now, that might sound a little weird considering the last decade, where you might have said, oh, well, what's really going to change the way we consume real estate is Zillow and online shopping tools. Or no, what's really going to change the way we consume real estate is the dichotomy between how many people are renting in the US and how many people own. And we might become like other countries and less people are going to own. There's a lot of things we could say that might disrupt the industry. And so it might sound a little weird to you that I say perhaps the biggest model disruption that is being well funded right now in the world of real estate, with billions of dollars of VC money backing the idea right now, originated with cash buy programs that's bleeding into the one-stop shop process. Now, if you're confused at all right now, I'm going to use a company name that I hate to even bring up, and I don't think they're doing a great job at it, but I think since we're Utahns, this paints the best picture. And it's a version of the Homey model. Okay. I do not think Homey's got it right. I have some personal intel with high-level executive people at Homey that it's likely to not turn a profit and fail relatively soon. But that's the idea, a one-stop shop where a consumer goes to one company and they get realtor negotiation and advice, and perhaps even an attorney reviewed contract, lending all within that, under that same umbrella, title all with under that same umbrella, hazard insurance all with under that same umbrella. And right now we're seeing some of that pop up, and we're also seeing what we have here at Berkshire work, which is affiliations and softwares that are essentially doing this and talking to each other. And behind the scenes, there's companies teaming up to create an environment where it's a one-stop shop. Don't let it scare you. This class isn't about that, so I don't have too much time to spend on what it looks like in the future. But my belief is the companies that will thrive are the ones that are remaining realtor and broker friendly. And there's some cash buy programs right now that are attempting to get national licensing and do what's called white label product, so that they can come to, say, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Utah Properties and say, here's $300 million on a line of credit, and all of your good, qualified, solid buyers are now cash buyers. And you can use our money and call the program whatever you want. You can call it Berkshire Hathaway Utah Cash if the brand approves that. So things like this are coming down the pike, guys. And I believe it's really going to change the way the industry works in the next, I'd say 3 on the low, 5 years on the long. In the meantime, we don't want to wait anymore. So we've got a solution for you that works right now. And I'm really excited about this. And since Nick and Tim opened up Metro Mountain Mortgage with the Ronies and have started this venture, since day one, I've been talking about trying to get a program like this. And here we are. One note before we dive into what it is and how it works. Well, I'll get to that on slide 2. I'll get to the one note. I was going to say, just don't tune me out here, because I've presented a similar type program a few times over the last month. And a lot of realtors go, okay, that's cool, but it's going to be no longer multiple offers. The market is softening. And so well, I'm not going to need this. I'm going to show you how, regardless of an up, down, or sideways market, I believe this is the future anyways. And so we might as well get used to transacting like this. So I don't think it's something to be used if you're only in a multiple offer situation and representing a buyer. And I'll explain in a minute. So what's a cash buy program? The cash buy program is simply letting your buyer compete with cash offers as if they too are empowered with cash. It's that simple. Devil's in the details, so we'll go through that fine print. But Nick, if you want to slide to the next one. So it's simply a solution that allows your client to go through enough underwriting that Metro Mountain Mortgage, backed by Cornerstone, feels confident enough in your client that they will empower you as the realtor to make a non-contingent on financing, non-contingent on appraisal offer. It's that simple, okay? And so how do they do that? How can they, and what does it cost? That's really what we're going to get to today. Nick, if you want to, I'm going to take over screen share, and I'm just going to, I think this is a good moment to just pause on the cash and talk Salt Lake market for just maybe 5 to 10 minutes here. Because as I mentioned a few minutes ago, as I've presented something similar over the last month, a lot of people go, yeah, that's cool, but what's going on with the market? That's the hot topic today, right? So here is a snapshot. And if any of you are wondering how to get to this, and I'm going to narrate, because I know when I screen share in Zoom, it's hard to actually see these numbers. So don't worry if you can't read the exact numbers. I'll tell you what it's saying. But quick lesson on statistics. If you're ever in the MLS, most of us spend our lives here. Search, residential, full search, right? And then we spend our lives here on forms and filling out contracts. If you pan over statistics, there's 7 options of different ways that the MLS auto-populates statistics for you to see. This is the home sales graph. The home sales graph only updates quarterly. So in 8 days, we'll be able to see second quarter of 2022. But the blue line is median price. So each dot shows the median price in that given quarter. So per this chart, the bottom of the last real estate decline, the bottom of the recession, was first quarter 2012, where median price in Salt Lake County, including condos and townhomes, was $176,000. The peak of the market prior to that was second quarter 2007, where median price was $236,000. We all know what's gone on the last decade, and that's history, but we're now at a median price of $521,000. That doesn't paint the whole picture as to what's going on in the market. You got to have some other data points to understand what's going on. If you heard that alone, which is what a lot of news articles tell your clients, which is why they think the sky is falling. If you looked at just this in the last decade and the tripling of pricing in 11 years, you might assume too that the sky was falling and the market was going to crash. My advice on some of the other tools you can look at is this one, which is the exact same report under statistics, but instead of home sales graph, you are clicking on sales per month. Okay. A quick note again on these statistics is a lot of realtors, when they go to pull data like this, get confused because they say, well, I clicked on, say, sales per month, and it just took me to the search page. Okay. That's where it's supposed to take you guys. What the MLS is telling you is, hey, you're about to run a monthly report, and I'm going to build you a data table, but I need to know what you want to look at. So I'm just going to say, let's look at Salt Lake County, and let's leave all unit types, single family, twin, mobile, recreational, condo, townhouse, and build me the report. If you want, though, you can get as specific as you do in MLS searches in your statistical report. So you could go by zip code. You could say, show me houses only over 4,000 square feet with a 3-car garage. So you can get very eloquent and specific in the data that you give your client. Okay, so we're staring at this same graph that we were looking at, except for now it's putting those data points in a table, and this report updates in real time. Okay, so this is really cool. I mean, you can check this morning and night, and the June 2022 sales will change. Right now, up until this moment in the MLS, there's been 797 sales in the month of June across all companies. Okay. So there's a few things that stand out to me that help me paint the picture to my clients as to what's going on in the market when I look at this report. Number one, right now, because of the rise in interest rates, everyone's panicking and saying the sky is falling. But based on this report, and this is similar in other counties for you, those of you that operate in other counties, the Wasatch Front or back, I've found the data to be similar in each county. June of 2021, so an entire year ago, marked the first month in 28 months that we sold less units in June of 2021 than we did in June of 2020. And that less unit sales has been the exact same for an entire year now. In other words, August of 2021 was less than August of 2020. And now June of 2022 is going to be less than 2021, which was less than 2020. So we are exactly 13 months into seeing less unit sales. The reason a lot of real estate brokerages have not been freaking out is because of price appreciation. The amount of volume, the amount of dollars running through the companies has remained relatively similar to last year, even though there's more unit sales because the prices are higher. Okay. Sorry for the side note. The reason I gave you that tangent is just to paint a little bit of market perspective and tell you that I don't believe that just because multiple offers are going to go down, which they are, or perhaps by this fall, winter, I think they could be a thing of the past for a while. I don't believe that's going to eradicate and cancel all of these cash transactions. And in an elevator pitch, I'd say one of those main reasons for that is simply that, and Nick, you can pull the presentation back up, is simply that I believe what we're about to outline has now come to two things that matter. One, it's come to a price point where it's as expensive for the consumer, or even a little bit less expensive for the consumer to transact this way than it is for them to go through the traditional find a house online, burn it, spend 90 days or 6 months looking while the market appreciates, lose out on that, have interest rates rise on me, blah, blah, blah. The cost of waiting can get very expensive, and I don't need to educate you on that. You all get that. Two, we're going to talk convenience factor of this new way to shop. Okay, next slide, Nick. Oh, by the way, I'm just going on and on, but if you do have questions, I want this to be informative and helpful for you. And we're pretty cash here. I'm very casual. So if you got questions, type them in the chat. Nick and Joe are monitoring that. And either of them are free to interrupt me at any time, and we can go on some little tangents if you got specific questions. So how does Cash Edge work? Okay. Step one is you got to reach out to Nick or Tim and or the lending team that they're building under the umbrella of Berkshire Hathaway. This is an exclusive program to them. It's being funded by their parent company, Cornerstone, who's one of the top lenders in the nation, who has the funds to be able to do this. Okay. So your client has to get underwritten, or let's call it pre-approved through Metro Mountain Mortgage. And as they do that, they're simply doing a real approval, I like to call it, which is a fully underwritten approval as opposed to just a quick phone conversation with your client saying, yeah, you should be good. Here's a pre-approval letter. With a full underwritten approval, they have the confidence, once they verify credit, income, and assets, to say, yes, your client, your buyer, your borrower qualifies for Cash Edge. If they qualify for Cash Edge, and we'll go over parameters in a minute, at that moment, you as their agent are free to go out and write rep Cs that literally have no financing contingency and no appraisal contingency if you feel you need to be that competitive. Okay. And here's what I think is insanely impressive. I do think Cornerstone will have to be nimble and change these numbers with interest rate changes. So don't be shocked if this changes a little bit. But for now, the cost of the program is pretty cut and dry, guys. It's only 1 point of the loan amount, or let's call it a 1% origination fee. So if your client's buying a place for $500 and they've got 10% down, so they're going to loan $450 and put down $50 in cash, they're only having to pay $4,500 to use Cornerstone's cash and 6% fixed interest only interest rate to buy the new house. I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? That's it. There's no other strings attached. Now, it is a short-term loan. What we are telling people is it's 4 months or less. And what happens if they use this money? Okay. We're going to get into some details as to whether they need to use the money or not. But if they use the money, and what is happening with title is nothing fishy. Okay. So let's just talk title transfer for a moment. You as the agent will write an offer just like you're used to doing for a cash buyer. You, if you're needing to be competitive, you can waive financing, you can waive appraisal, and you are still just writing it in the name of your buyer. Okay. Good question, Julie, on proof of funds. We will get you a proof of funds letter from the lender. So Nick or Tim, or I keep saying their loan officer team because in St. George, they've got somebody, they're building out the team as we speak. Your Metro Mountain Mortgage lender who pre-qualified them will get you a proof of funds. So you can make a traditional cash offer. Great question. And you will just proceed forward, close the transaction in their name with Cornerstone's cash. That cash will be a loan against their title for 6% interest only. And at closing, they'll be charged 1 point origination, and they'll just pay on that like a traditional mortgage for up to 120 days. And what's going on behind the scenes during the same time frame is that Metro Mountain is refinancing that client into traditional financing. Okay. So if you're really splitting hairs, I'll answer your appraisal question in just a minute, Rachel. So if you're really splitting hairs and you were laying this out on an Excel spreadsheet, because I've gotten this gritty with clients. By the way, guys, I've closed 3 of these already. If you're really getting down to the nitty gritty with clients, they're going to say, okay, hold on. What's the true cost of this? So there's the 1 point origination. There's 6% interest only. And technically I'm having 2 sets of closing costs because I'm buying it with Cash Edge from Cornerstone, and then I'm refinancing and I'm going to have both those sets of closing costs. So another couple $1,000. This is true. And I personally have experience over the last 90 days sitting down with consumers, closing transactions, and going over this very specifically. This is a side note from the presentation. So you maybe just keep this recording or maybe take notes on this. But here's my real street experience in explaining this to clients. We as realtors tend to forget that there are many more costs associated with that traditional timeline I laid out when we started this Zoom today, okay? Costs that we forget are part of the transaction. Costs that our consumers for sure forget are part of the transaction unless we tell them. What are those costs? Well, on a traditional timeline, most of our consumers are moving twice, unless we can perfectly time their buy and sell, right? And even if you think you can personally align those dates, how many of you over the last few years have had to do lease backs on your listings, free lease backs, so you get that for your seller, so that they then have the buyer close their old home, and then they have a 30-day lease back, and then they're doing shotgun approach and trying to hurry and go find something to buy, okay? Cost number one, aligning the stars and most likely moving twice. We tend to forget about that. That can be costly. Cost number two is not only the cost associated with moving, but the cost associated with floating both properties. See, I've sat down with consumers and explained this cash buy program, and they go, that all sounds cool, Jake, but I love the idea that without selling our existing property, we can go out right now and make a cash offer and move into the new place. But then we're having to pay this 1% origination and 6% interest only on the new place. And we still have our old mortgage. And so it gets really expensive. That's true. But I think when our consumers say that, they're forgetting that that's most likely a scenario they're going to have if they consume traditionally. And furthermore, the biggest issue with that cost versus the new cash way to buy is that not only might you be floating 2 mortgages, but that's only if you qualify. That's only if you can qualify to hold your existing and go buy the new, okay? Cost number 3 that we often forget about is the time value of money. And oh boy, this is the biggest one. This might be changing a little now, but it's been the biggest one for a decade, and it was put on steroids the last 26 months, okay? And what I mean by that is, how many of you in your career have shopped around all day on a Saturday with a buyer, and then they go, hey, I really liked the one on Main Street and but I don't know, I'm just not feeling it. I didn't feel right. And so I'm just we'll go back to the drawing board, or I'm going to wait for the right one to come along, or, you've all heard it. I'm being facetious. You've all heard it. Okay. Have you ever sat down with that consumer like I have and showed them using the graph I just showed you 10 minutes ago, or the table, and said, here is your true cost of waiting? Okay. And that cost gets ridiculous if you factor interest rates rising in it, but forget interest rates. If you just sit down with a consumer and say, all right, Johnson family, you're looking for a house up to 500. We've been looking for 30 days. You haven't liked anything. Your budget can't change. It's remaining 500. And so far in the month of June, 2021, median price went up 6.25% in the month of June. In other words, if you'd have bought at the 1st of June for 500, that house on Main Street that you liked, it would now be worth 535. To find an equivalent house, the reason you're not liking everything we're seeing is because the inventory for the same price is getting worse as we wait. And that's simply appreciation happening. By the way, that's one of the most powerful tools in my career if you learn how to explain that correctly to consumers, because think of it, guys, anything else pretty much anything else. We go to buy in life or we go to consume as consumers, devalues the moment we buy it. So we're all jaded. Even if you know how to talk about this eloquently, we're jaded. We're used to coupons, discounts. We all want a deal. You want a new TV. What's the price at Costco? Hop on Amazon. You're comparing. And there's a plethora of inventory. So you have unlimited time to make your buy. And with electronics, said thing you're going to buy only gets cheaper if you wait. So I've found that even my savvy, well-educated, well-to-do consumers apply those same shopping principles to real estate, and it just doesn't work that way in real estate, okay? So that's cost number 3. So we forget all these unique, true costs that affect our pocketbook when we go to consume. And if you can adequately align the stars and explain those costs, and then tell a consumer, hey, I've got a solution for you that eliminates all of those costs. Yes, it costs 1 origination point and 6% while you're waiting, but it eliminates all these other costs. You can really lay out on a spreadsheet how this can be more cost effective, truly, for a consumer than consuming the old way. Oh, and by the way, it's a hell of a lot more convenient if you forget the money talk and you just say, as Will Cooper has said before when I talk statistics, he's like, guys, Jake's great for that, but also remember, we don't all just buy real estate simply for the investment. There are emotional and personal ties to it. So we can go down all of that lane and explain the more convenient ways this is easier for the consumer to transact. The one other thing we need to say is that this gets even better for the borrower. And Metro Mountain Mortgage cannot legally require, if they're pre-qualifying your client, empowering them with the cash, closing the transaction in cash, they can incentivize your client to then refinance with them, but they can't make it a requirement. They can't say, since we pre-qualified you and gave you the cash to buy this house, you now have to refi with us. Can't do that. So what they are doing is saying that they will refund half of the 1% origination at the time of refinance if the customer uses them to refinance. So it gets insanely competitive for your buyer. Okay, I'll pause now and just pop up the chat and see if we can address some of these questions. Okay, Rachel said, we mentioned earlier there could be no appraisal. I see on the screen that there's an appraisal needed. Can you expand on that? Sure. All right. So many of you know, as you've become experts in negotiation, that there's a big difference between writing something in a contract that is a contingency contractually or having it as an option. Here's what I mean by that. If you wrote in a REPC that there is, you check the box, no financing contingency, does that mean that your client can't get financing? Okay, absolutely not. If you write into an offer that there is no appraisal contingency, check, no appraisal contingency. Does that mean that you cannot do an appraisal? No, it doesn't. So we need to distinguish the difference between what you write in the contract and what the buyer's legal rights are. Now, this can get you in a pickle, okay? Because if you're in a competitive situation where you represent a buyer and there's 5 offers on a property and you're trying to convince the listing agent that this is a cash offer and no financing is required and there's a no appraisal contingency, and then they accept your offer and then the next day you're ordering an appraisal, a good listing agent's going to question you, okay? That's for sure. So I'm going to tell you 2 things that I've learned in actually doing this. The first thing is you got to be specific and eloquent in what you're explaining to the listing agent. And if you get my experience is if you get too long-winded, you're going to talk yourself into some confusion, and that's really going to confuse the listing agent. So if you try to say the whole story that we've painted here, hey, we have an affiliation with an internal mortgage company and they are providing cash to my client and they've already underwritten them, and it's very competitive in pricing, and we're going to close it like this and then refinance them, they're going to be like, whoa, sounds fishy. That's my experience. So I've found the easier way to do this is just the elevator pitch. The easier way to do it, if the listing agent really starts deciphering your offer and asking questions, is to simply revert back to the contract and say, yep, we've made you a good, strong cash offer at 500. You know, it's closing in 14 days. It's not contingent upon financing. It's not contingent on appraisal. Okay. Especially if you're in a multiple offer situation, you keep it simple. You revert back to the contract. What the contract is law. Okay. Once you go under contract, it can be a tidbit uncomfortable, but if you explain it correctly, it's within your client's legal rights. You just say, hey, you know, we still have a 10-day due diligence. We've ordered the inspection. And by the way, the buyer has decided they do want to do an appraisal. And, you know, but it's not contingent upon that. So it doesn't matter where it comes in, et cetera, et cetera. One more note on appraisals. Every situation is different. And when you actually go to write one of these offers, you are going to have Nick or Tim or someone at Metro Mountain Mortgage providing you a pre-qualification letter for the client, providing you a proof of funds to make the cash offer. And I think it's worth at that moment having a bit of discussion about the property you're making an offer on. How do you feel the comps are? Do you think you're going to have an appraisal problem? You'll see in a slide coming up, there's different parameters depending on the price range of the property and how much your client needs to have down. And the reason for that discussion is just to make sure there's some protection and your client has enough down in the event that it doesn't appraise and they're having to cover a small gap. I think these programs will evolve and change with the market. So at least down here in Salt Lake, under $1 million, our appraisal problems have kind of evaporated over the last 24 months. Do anybody remember coming out of the recession? Like 2013, 14, 15, as the market really ramped back up in appreciation, but we had all these old, really dilapidated, low sold comps. We were having, like, every closing I had an appraisal problem. With the insanity of the market, those have, at least in my business, have kind of been pretty rare the last few years. So we will shift these parameters of this program, you know, with market conditions and do our best to protect you so that you're not getting into situations where you agreed in a REPC that it's not contingent on appraisal. You hurry and do one. There's a massive appraisal gap. And now you have a really hard time negotiating that with the listing agent because it's not conditioned on an appraisal. I get that it can put you in a pickle, but those should be rare occasions right now. Let's see. Rachel, I think your second question too, she's basically saying, okay, let's say I do a good job explaining this to a listing agent and they kind of get it, but then they say, oh, but we have 4 other cash offers and yours is fake cash because your clients really don't have this cash. And I've got 2 others that are borrowers that it's their cash. I've got 2 things to say to that. Hopefully this is helpful for you. My experience, again, being from the streets and having actually like sat down with clients, explained this to listing agents, is this. About 1/3 of all of our transactions on the Wasatch front over the past 2 years, it's actually 38%, have been cash. It's pretty shocking to find out, right? 1 in 3 are cash anyways. But my experience is, I don't know if yours is similar, my experience is that very often it's not the buyer on the REPC's cash anyways. It's a company, it's hard money, especially with investors. It's an entity, it's a parent, it's an uncle, it's somebody else coming in. And those of you that have listed a lot of properties, if you paid attention to that, you get a bunch of offers, a bunch are saying that they're cash. You ask for pre-approval and or proof of funds. Buyer's agent has a hard time getting it to you. It finally comes over. Most agents don't even look at it. They're like, all right, I got proof of funds. I trust it. If you go look at those proof of funds, I'm here to tell you less than 50% of the time, those proof of funds are not in that buyer's name. And furthermore, even if they are supposedly in the buyer's name, they're like an account that's has tax consequences to get the money out, like a 401k. Okay. So Rachel, I'm painting you this picture because if I was in that situation and I represented the buyer and the listing agent was kind of giving me some crap about us not being a real cash buyer, I'd say two things. One, I would say, here, please contact Nik Lowry at M3, and he will tell you how qualified they are, and he will confirm to you that Cornerstone will step in with the cash and close this no matter what, based on what we've written in the rep sheet. And number two, I challenge you to go back and look at your 4 other cash offers and really decide and decipher if the proof of funds are in those buyers' names. And I'll bet you a lot of the times it's not. And even if it is, that's going to win you some kudos. The listing agent's going to go like, all right, touche, you know what you're talking about. And it's going to give them some confidence that you understand the program, that is a legitimate buyer. And so those are kind of the two things you can do to navigate that. Okay, Steve, great question. So if you use Metro, so if Metro Mountain Mortgage closes in cash and then they refinance the client, are you going to have 2 sets of closing costs? Are you going to have 2 sets of the 195 transaction fee? Are you going to have 2 sets of appraisal costs? If there's an HOA, are you going to have a transfer fee upon the cash closing and another transfer fee upon the refinance? I just had this 2 weeks ago, and the buyer was relatively upset, okay, because this exact scenario applied. The short answer is yes. This is a cost associated with the program, and there's no way around 1 set of closing costs to buy it cash and a second set of closing costs to refinance. I'll briefly say though, if you align HUDs and you look at the actual costs of a cash purchase and a refinance, 2 of them, they add up to about the same title fees as a traditional mortgage-backed single one-time close, okay? Because cash, you get some discounts, and refinance is less than traditional purchase. That's on title fees. Third-party fees, such as HOA transfer fees and stuff, this is why we had a consumer a little bit upset 2 weeks ago, is we did this on a property in Daybreak. We closed. There was a $1,200 HOA transfer fee, and then 45 days later, their refinance was complete and another transfer fee had to be paid. I stepped in at that point. I called Daybreak. I worked with the title company to try to get that discounted and have them talk to them, since it was only 45 days. And voila, they did decrease it in half. So we saved $600. But yeah, I wouldn't try to pull one over your client's eyes. There's going to be 2 sets of closing costs. So that's just kind of part of the program. Steve, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to clarify that. But great, you were able to get the transfer fee reduced some. At least you created your value again.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that's a great question, and that's going to come up, guys, and it's going to be a cost of doing business. Okay, Julie's question: timeline for closing cash offers: 5 days to close, 14 days to close, et cetera, et cetera. Nik, do you want to answer that? And in answering it, maybe lead me into one of our next slides that's going to go over scenario 1 and scenario number 2.
Yep. So first of all, legally, the quickest that it can be closed is seven days. You'll see later on in the slide, it says 10, but technically it's 7 days. And so quite quick. Something I just off topic, just wanted to go back to the appraisal piece just to clarify. When we're talking about the Cash Edge program, we do not require an appraisal upfront. So there's no appraisal fee. The appraisal only applies when you do the refinance. So and we'll dive into this more further on in the presentation, but so first of all, the client will be pre-qualified or pre-approved upfront via a credit, income, and asset underwrite. They'll be issued a pre-approval letter, just like we normally would. You go shopping, you identify the property that you want to make an offer on. Once we have that address, we will quickly run 2 electronic appraisals. They're called AVMs, automated valuation method appraisals. They don't cost anything to the client. It's just something that we do internally that determines that it determines the value of the property, so that you'll know, so the client will know that the price that you're offering is in line with what the value of those electronic appraisals came back at. But there's no cost for that. At that time, that's when we issue a proof of funds letter. So hopefully that clarified that piece. I know we backtracked a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Perfect. So in short, guys, my advice, and again, this is ever changing with the market, but offers I'm writing right now, if I need to be as competitive as possible, in other words, step one, if you're writing an offer, and this should be a traditional practice anyways, is reach out to the listing agent and see what the latest is. Don't advise your client, or don't start drafting it until you have the latest information from the listing agent, such as, am I going to be in a multiple offer situation? What's your timeline for accepting offers and response? What's the seller's timeline? What are they looking for? I mean, those things can go a long way. If you are in a very competitive situation, which we're very used to the last couple of years, I would write an offer that looks like this. No financing contingency, no appraisal contingency, settlement deadline 7 days out, but I would still write in a 5-day due diligence period. And if you need to be extremely competitive and the listing agent is questioning that, you can even write an addendum that says your buyer is planning to take the property in as-is condition and will not ask for repairs, but you're still requesting a 5-day due diligence period. Okay. Now, the other thing that comes into question on those contract terms is earnest money. Is earnest money going hard upon acceptance, or is it going hard after that 5-day due diligence period? Every situation is different. If you need to be competitive, you might need to have some earnest money go hard up front, and then your client's very bound. If you can get away with it and just say it's a 5-day swift due diligence, I would do that because it allows everybody some breathing room. But I understand that we're not always able to get that. Okay, let's go back to some questions really quick. That answered timing. Do we have programs for first-time buyers, second homes, rentals, etc.? Right now, this is a new program, and it does work for first-time home buyers definitively. You don't have to have a home to sell. So first-time home buyers, yes. Second home buyers, rentals, the answer is yes. We'll look at every situation right now, but there's going to be a little bit stringent terms, a little bit less of an LTV, and the buyer is likely going to have to come in with a little more cash. But at the end of the day, what rules the roost is if Metro Mountain Mortgage is confident in the customer's long-term ability to refinance for the takeout financing, they're going to have no problem issuing the cash. By the way, guys, this has gone straight to the top of Cornerstone, and we've met with the executive team for about 6 months to create this. We are literally the first JV they are rolling it out to, and they have set aside these funds so that they can fund this program. It's not hypothetical, it's real. All right, Leslie. If it's a cash deal, we got to close at seller's title. I was going to get to that, but you beat me to the punch. Yeah, that is Utah state law. So and that's okay. If needs be, if it's going to be a sticking point for the listing agent, then fine. We can close at the seller's title company. That's no problem. I have been writing this little addendum as I've been writing offers. And I've been saying buyer will use blank as escrow company upon a cash closing. Blank title company has agreed to do a courtesy signing of the buyer. Why am I doing that? This just gets a little more complicated than a traditional transaction. And so I like to still have it go through my title, my contacts. It's just more convenient. I know and trust everybody. But if I get any pushback from the listing agent and they're questioning why that is, I'll duck tail and say that we can use seller's title company. The language I'm using there, and I can send it to everybody, so you've got it, is basically saying that my title company is just going to do a courtesy close because that's how the state sees it. In other words, the seller's title company is issuing the title policy. And since there's not a loan, there's no title policy for the buyer. So there's really no money to be made for the buyer's title company. But I've talked with our title company and they will facilitate a courtesy close in those scenarios. So we keep it under one roof. Okay, let's see. A few other questions. Yep, Leslie, I'll share that addendum. Okay, Jill, that's a great question. And Nick, I think this is one for you. When they go to refinance, can closing costs be rolled into that refi so they have no additional costs?
Absolutely. Yes, they can be rolled in. And then we'll get into this in a further slide, but there will not be any additional amount down required, Jill. That is actually taken part, that's part of the cash edge loan, and we'll get into that in just a moment. Yeah. So there's a minimum down payment depending on the loan amount that's required for the cash edge loan. So no additional down on the refi.
Julie is wanting to know if we can cross state lines. Not yet. I firmly believe that's coming in the future. If you're trying to send a referral and you want to do something like this, maybe just shoot me an email because I have some other options for you. And at the end of the day, I'll do my best to help you look like you're really helping out your client. Nick, let's fly through the rest. Guys, we don't have too much left here. I know we're out of time. I think we addressed all these issues. So I think you all have a pretty good understanding as to the competitive advantage of using something like this. Let me tell you this as sales folk, as realtors. Guys, I am telling you, even if your clients don't use this, you should be presenting it to every client you have, listings and buyers. Here's why. It's something, I'm not going to say nobody else, because now I've heard of a few other realtors aligning with programs. But when I started talking about it a few years ago, nobody, if I was in a competitive listing situation, if I was competitive representing a buyer situation, no other realtor had these capabilities. And when my clients went, wait, I don't understand the fine print, but you can empower me with cash. Like literally, my wife can go out shopping this weekend. We can make an offer on something. We can close on it by next weekend and we can just move into our new house. And then we have time to spruce up and sell our old one, which by the way, they might net more money. That's cost association number 4 we don't think of. It's really powerful. So even if they don't use it, it makes your clients go, wow. Jake Breen has options for me that no one else has. All right, next slide, Nick. Only a couple more here and we'll fly through these. So here are the terms according to the price, the value of the property. You can go up to 90% LTV for loans that are conforming or higher balance limits. So, conventional traditional financing, that's going to be different in every county, but in Salt Lake, that's about up to $650,000. They will provide up to 90% of that cash. Your client only needs 10% down. This is a more complicated question. Nobody's asked it, but we are trying to come up with a way that if your client doesn't have that cash, but they own an existing property and they have equity in that property, to do what's called some cross collateralization so that they could still qualify for the cash program, even though they don't have 10 or 20 or 35% down, as long as they have equity in their existing personal residence. So I'm hoping that that's coming down the pike. 80% LTV for high balance limits, higher than conventional, so higher than 650 in Salt Lake, but under 1.5. And then 1.5 to 2 million, your client's going to need 35% down. For you Park City folk, trust me, we're well aware of where pricing's at, and we've been talking with Cornerstone's executive team and a $1 billion funded new company called GuidePoint out of LA that is white labeling these programs and providing lines of credit. And we're trying to come up with a jumbo, like, you know, up to 5 million solution that we can lay out, and perhaps something even for new construction. So I'm hoping we can work something like that out in the future. Right now, the maximum loan amount is going to be 2 million. Okay. Are lease backs still allowed? Yep. Just as you would a traditional transaction, if you've got to do a lease back, that's fine. The issue becomes the refinance. If underwriting really scrutinizes that, most of you know that for personal residence financing, the rule is typically 60 days or less in a lease back. So as long as it's 60 days or less, we shouldn't run into any refinance issues when they go to take out the long-term financing. Okay. And I think that answers all the questions. Nick, you can just pan through the last few. Let me see if there's anything. Oh, there's one last thing I need to say. And this is very powerful as well. We thought of so many ways we could roll this out to your consumers. And as I mentioned 5 minutes ago, even if they don't use it, you should still bring it up because it's a very powerful tool and is a differentiator for you. But here's another cool part. I'm going to call this what's happening behind the scenes. On a timeline, if you present this to a client and they say, cool, I might use it, probably won't, but I might, then just get them pre-qualified with Metro Mountain Mortgage. That's step one. And then Nick or Tim or one of the other LOs can tell you if they qualify for the program and at least give it to them as an option. The next step after that is go shopping, okay? Once you are under contract, your buyer may or may not need that cash. And what I mean by that is you may have had to make an extremely competitive offer, not contingent on financing, not contingent on appraisal, proof of funds from the Cash Edge program and all that jazz. But then the listing agent might say to you, hey, Jake, we're going under contract with you, but we need a lease back. And I know you're willing to close in 7 days, but you know, gosh, we need a 60-day lease back. And then you're going to say, well, you're okay with a 20-day close? And if you can negotiate that, you're going to save your client the costs associated with needing the cash. Here's how that works. Okay. Metro Mountain Mortgage is then going to try to hurry and still get them traditional financing to buy the place while you are in escrow. They're going to still have the funds set aside so you don't get in a pickle and you can still close the transaction according to what you wrote in the REPC. But if they can have a loan done by the settlement deadline without asking for an extension, they're just going to close your client at that moment. And it's okay if you still waived appraisal and waived the financing condition and all that jazz in the REPC. Nor are you ethically, I know I'm towing a gray line here, so hear me out, nor are you ethically lying to the listing agent. Okay, you got to be a little bit specific in what you say, but your intention is to use Cash Edge. If the client can qualify during escrow to just do a traditional loan, then that's how Nick and Tim are going to close them and save them the 1% origination, save them 2 sets of closing costs, and save them from having to have 6% interest while they sell their old home. Okay, so you have two scenarios in the way this could go down. They could end up closing with cash. If they do, they're immediately going to start a refinance. If it can close during escrow with a one-time close, traditional financing, they're going to go that route and save that client even more money. Cool. That's it, guys. It's as simple as that. So as the market shifts, we'll be updating terms. We're going to teach more classes on this. I've been doing this 20 years. I have thought about something like this for 6. And I do believe the industry's trending this way anyways. So we might as well get used to transacting like this. Even if you don't think that, think about the last 2 years and how the way we consume real estate has shifted, and how easy it has been to obtain cash, and how often customers are buying that new one before they even sell their old one. Trust me when I say disruption comes when the costs associated with transacting the old way get in line with the costs associated with transacting a new way, and that new way is more convenient for the consumer. That's when you see major disruption. And there are billions of dollars coming to our industry that's making this new way to transact as affordable or even more affordable than the old way. So I really think you'll see it change. I hope this is a powerful tool for all of you moving into the future. And if you got any questions, just reach out to Nick or Tim, and they can get right on pre-qualifying your buyer. It's no more difficult than a traditional pre-qualification. And then they're empowered with cash, and it makes your life a lot easier. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.